Open phone lines for the rest of the hour. You can sound off on pretty much anything you want. And phone number is 217-629-7970. We'll see if you can get through the roulette. Because apparently some people still can't get through. Others are able to get through. Not sure what's going on with our phone system, but if you can make it, your voice can be heard here, live and local, 217-629-7970. ABW121 on YouTube says, tried the 312 number and got the same cannot be completed message. So others, though, were able to call in, even from 217 numbers, 312 numbers, 91 something or other. So, yeah, call in, 217-629-7970. And you can sound off on what we've talked about so far this morning, from President Donald Trump pleading not guilty to a range of charges, from conspiracy to defraud the United States to tampering with witness to conspiracy against rights of citizens. These are serious allegations, no question. And the indictment itself, the term knowingly false is raised multiple times, alleging that former President Trump advanced theories that he said the prosecutors say was, quote, knowingly false. So interesting to hear that. We also had Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, and yesterday we highlighted him talking about not saying that it was mob action of 40 people being arrested over the weekend last weekend. He says they're large gatherings and don't call young people baby Al Capones. He also talked about what cut up means. So if you want to sound off on that, you can as well. 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on WMAY. Go ahead. You're on the air. Check one.
There's no excuse.
All right. There you go. You're on the air. Good morning.
Brandon Johnson trying to excuse them kids. There's no excuse for that. He needs to capture that city, bring it back, and not make excuses. Cutting up is not the correct term for what's going on up there.
So what do you think's the best route here? Is it holding people accountable, or is it setting up safe spaces for kids to, quote, cut up?
I say the parents need to be held accountable. They should know where their children are at all times. There's no excuse. There's no reason they shouldn't be out there. They need to set a stricter curfew law, something, but they need to get that city back.
Yeah, and I think you're probably sharing a sentiment a lot of people are sharing. And how we get to that approach, how we get certain individuals to see that, what can you do? What have you done? Have you called your local officials? Have you put pressure on certain elected people to say, all right, enough's enough here?
I just keep complaining about him. He should never been voted in to begin with. They should have stuck with Green. Jamal Green would have did a better job.
All right. Appreciate the call, and thanks so much for calling in. Glad you were able to get through 217-629-7970. So they wanted to talk about Brandon Johnson and his taking what I've heard characterized as a kid's glove approach to these, quote, large gatherings where you can't call them mobs. But obviously there's some contention there with how to treat that. Good morning. You're on WMAY, open phones. Glad you made it through.
Yeah, he talks about mob, and he talks about you got to use the right terminology. Well, the meaning of mob has several different meanings. I mean, even if you just Google mob, it's a large crowd of people, especially one that is disorderly and has intent of causing trouble or violence. And that's exactly what that was. So I think he's kind of skewed on his terminology.
Yeah, and he even recognized that there was damage done. He also talked about how one store was looted. This is obviously criminal conduct, but he doesn't want to call it a mob. He just wants to call it a large gathering of kids who want to cut up.
Maybe he doesn't know what the word mob means. I mean, he goes right to Al Capone and the mafia or whatever. But that's not what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and the legal definition of a mob is that it's a group of people conducting themselves in a criminal fashion and being unruly. Appreciate the call, 217-629-7970. So, hey, people are getting through. All right, I was worried that the phone lines were going to be completely jacked up, but apparently we're in business. So if you want to chime in on that, on Brandon Johnson, you can do so, 217-629-7970. Or you can sound off on former former President Donald Trump pleading not guilty. So maybe we hear some of the various news clips coming back here. But, of course, your phone calls at 217-629-7970 is the phone number. Now, here in Springfield last summer, I don't know if it's been an issue this summer, but last summer we had pop-up parties that were happening where, at a public park in the late evening, early morning hours, there were large gatherings of people blaring music. There were some fights that broke out. And I remember there were neighbors complaining to the city council here in Springfield about this, about the loud behavior, keeping people awake, all the vehicles that were blocking people's driveways, and the unruly behavior. Now, we didn't hear the term mob used in various places. It was more of a pop-up party. But police, they indicated they sometimes may have a difficult time trying to block these things from going on because when they do try to crack down, it spreads on social media that, the gathering is going to move to another place. And we've seen it too, outside of convenience stores in Springfield. But what happened in Chicago, it seems to be even much more elevated, right? Where you've got 40 arrests after what was reported hundreds of people gathering. You had damage done to property. You had a convenience store that had some looting. And this obviously is something that can't be tolerated, right? You can't have a civil society allowing for this type of conduct. And there's going to be a lot of pushback on what Mayor Brandon Johnson said was just some large gatherings of kids looking to, quote, cut up. 217-629-7970. We'll go to another call here. Glad you made it through. Good morning. You're on. No, you would have been on WMAY. All right, we'll get more of your calls coming up because obviously there's a lot of people that still want to talk about Brandon Johnson and what he had to say this week. But I also want to hear from you about the indictment against former President Trump. Have you read the indictment? I was able to take it in, at least one initial blush. And again, a lot of the terminology in there is knowingly false claims of election fraud. And it seems to be really a review of the president and his team trying to find a way to trigger the next phase of an electoral college process that's laid out in our history to go from the electoral college votes, the electors, to instead having it go to the U.S. House and the states, because there is a process there that can play out and has played out in our history. And it seems that at least the narrative that the prosecutors spell out in Trump's indictment, that's what Trump apparently was trying to do, is just to trigger the next phase of the electoral college process on all the different backstops that there are in the Constitution. And I think it's really a testament to show how much foresight our founding fathers had by having these backstops placed in the way we have presidential elections. Bottom line is, though, Trump lost. I mean, they ultimately did certify the election on January 6, 2021. But you've got now, 2.5 years later here, the former president facing a whole host of charges in this case, let alone all the other cases you've got to deal with. So you can sound off on that as well. 217-629-7970. Let's get to your calls next here with WMA. Continuing on with open phones at 217-629-7970. If you want to talk to me, it's that simple. Hopefully it's that simple. We've had people call in from all across the state. Area codes, I don't even know what they are. But somebody, even Scott on YouTube, saying that he gets the same message that it can't be completed calling from a 217 number. And he says he's on I-72 close to Alexander, Illinois. So, interesting. Some people are able to get in, others aren't. I'd love to hear your voice if you can call in at 217-629-7970. We've been talking a lot about Brandon Johnson and how he says that we shouldn't, demonize youth, ultimately saying that, hey, sometimes kids just want to cut up, and he characterizes that as, let's go ahead and hear the Chicago mayor himself lay out what his definition of cut up is.
Now, as far as preventative, so let me just say it like this. Bear with me for a second. So you all know I've been a public school teacher. And so sometimes you have a number of students who want to find spaces where they can cut up. You have to Google that. It's like black terminology for doing things, potentially harmful to someone or someone else or themselves. And when we would build systems to prevent that from happening, and this is what I've expressed to our interim superintendent.
So he wants to build systems that prevents kids from wanting to get out and, quote, cut up. But don't call them a mob because the mayor will push back on you.
But we have to be very careful when we use language to describe certain behavior. There's history in this city. To refer to children as like baby Al Capones is not appropriate.
So again, it's Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. A lot of people still interested in sounding off on that. 217-629-7970. But another major story, of course, you've got the indictment against the former president, Donald Trump. And here is some of what he had to say yesterday before flying out of Washington, D.C. after pleading not guilty to charges that he committed fraud and, spread knowingly false claims about the election. Here is former President Donald Trump.
Thank you very much. This is a very sad day for America. And it was also very sad driving through Washington, D.C. and seeing the filth and the decay and all of the broken buildings and walls and the graffiti. This is not the place that I left. It's a very sad thing to see it. When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America. This is the persecution of the person that's leading by very, very substantial numbers in the Republican primary and leading Biden by a lot. So if you can't beat him, you persecute him or you prosecute him. We can't let this happen in America. Thank you very much.
So it's former President Trump on the tarmac just before leaving Washington, D.C. after pleading not guilty to charges ranging from conspiracy to defraud the United States to conspiracy against rights of citizens and tampering with a witness, victim, or informant. 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Comment on a couple of things real quickly.
Please.
First of all, the Trump indictment, it is what he tried to do with that knowingly false information. He tried to incite violence. He needs to be held accountable for that.
And those are the allegations that he spread what the prosecutors say is knowingly false claims. Now, how you say Trump believes that, they're going to have to prove that in court, but they also lead up in all of the narrative and the steps they go through painstakingly in this 45-page indictment. It essentially lays out that he took steps to try to spread this knowingly false claim, and they indicate that it led to individuals going to Washington, D.C., upset, and even using some of his quotes, but not all of his quotes. They refrained from including the verbatim of him saying, peacefully and patriotically go to the Capitol. They didn't include that in the indictment, which I think is something the defense is going to come back during the trial and say, well, that's exculpatory information that you left out. But regardless, you're saying that Trump is guilty of this and needs to be held accountable.
Correct.
All right. And another topic you wanted to touch on? Go ahead.
Johnson,
please.
He needs to learn what the definition of a mob is and got to start holding people accountable up there. Arrest them, charge them, prosecute them.
Well, I tell you what, I think there's a theme to your call, and that is we need more accountability.
You got it.
All right. Appreciate it. That's how it's done here. Phone lines are open for you at 217-629-7970. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Greg. So with this Trump thing's crazy. So he has to be in his head knowingly that he thought that the election wasn't stolen. The entire time he's claimed that the election was stolen. He has plenty of evidence to show that the administration or bureaucrats changed election law without legislative approval. They counted votes after the fact. So there's plenty of election interference and election fraud. But the question is, was there enough to overturn the election results and tilt it to Joe Biden? I don't have that objective data, but we can say yes, there was fraud. Yes, there was election interference. Yes, social media squandered and sequestered stories, which clearly had a role on the voting. All right, so Donald Trump has a clear case that if he says that the election was stolen. So when Jack Smith sat there and said you violated civil rights, if Donald Trump wins his case, Jack Smith can be charged for the same crime because in turn he's violating Donald Trump's right for First and Fourth Amendment activity to get involved politically, First Amendment protected speech. So he'd have to charge himself if Donald Trump's acquitted on this. It's just crazy land anymore.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because you're right. There was some fraud, and even the national security director at the time said, yes, there was election interference, but it didn't rise to the level of changing the outcome, Mr. President. And the prosecutors in their indictments, they lay out Trump was told time and again there wasn't a level of fraud that you're claiming there is, and this, and that, and the other. So they're essentially trying to build that base of saying Trump was told time and again that his claims aren't true. But we know Trump's character. Nobody's going to tell Trump what to think.
Right, and he's had bad advice before. I mean, he had the death walrus, Bolton.
He hired John Bolton, for crying out loud. So, yeah.
I mean, so he had some bad advice. So if people are telling him, oh, Donald Trump, don't trust your gut, the elections were perfect, and he's getting these evidence and these videos of what's going on people slipping bags underneath tables. And
it stacks up from there. Hey, I appreciate the call. Let's get another one in at 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Good morning, Greg.
Hey.
I watched that on the 6th there when that all was happening live on TV. One state certified. The rest of the states seems like they didn't want it certified, and they got to about the third or fourth one that didn't want it certified. Then all of a sudden that thing outside the Capitol broke loose. I think somebody from the inside set them loose. That's my opinion.
All right. Everybody's, owed their opinion, but they're like elbows, right? Everybody's got at least one. All right, it is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY. Let's get more of your calls all this hour, all right? 217-629-7970. Maybe we touch on full-day kindergarten. Maybe we touch on your energy prices. They going up? Is it making you rethink getting an electric vehicle? So stay tuned. We'll get to that coming up here with Springfield's Morning News. We've been taking your calls all hour about Brandon Johnson's comments out of Chicago, about the Trump indictment, and some comments on YouTube, ranging from Brandon Johnson is good at newspeak, enthusiastic youths who are mostly peaceful, developing a neighborhood culture of their choosing. Others saying that Trump absolutely did not incite violence and the election was rigged. All right, so these are just some of the comments coming up here from some of the people on YouTube. But obviously, you can call in at 217-629-7970. Earlier, when I was talking about Brandon Johnson's tact in discussing the activity where 40 people were arrested, and somebody indicated even some handguns were found on these individuals that were, quote, just there to cut up. I use the term kids' gloves. But my wife pointed out it's kid gloves because it's about, dealing with kids like baby goats, right? So it's actually goat skin gloves. So I didn't know that. Stuff you learn every day, the etymology of words. Maybe if we had full day kindergarten, that's something that I would understand more if they taught that. And that's a new law that Governor J.B. Pritzker signed to expand half-day kindergarten into full-day kindergarten. But not everybody is necessarily on board with this, as you've got the supporters of it saying that it helps children having full day in their ability to learn reading and mathematics and so on. But you have some, including Allison Maley, PR director with the Illinois Principals Association, raising some concerns here about the process.
One of the major concerns we had was that there was no funding allotted for this, And, not only will some districts need additional space, they will need additional teachers.
Brian Sodi with the Illinois Association of School Boards says mandating the entire state to offer full-day kindergarten is not the way to go.
Folks who can have done it, and in those areas where there's a struggle for a reason. Either voters have said no, or the facilities or other things become a very real factor.
And Sodi also says that this has been brought up in local referendums across the state and has been rejected in some places.
This is a mandate that we think will require volunteer elected school boards to force this on taxpayers who have stated they don't want it.
So obviously, full-day kindergarten, while some are saying, hey, the National Education Association, the union, they support it. They'll get more teacher jobs and more dues coming into the union from it. But you've got taxpayers who are going to ultimately have to pick up the bill, and you got to think about resources, class size, teachers. If they're going to increase all-day kindergarten, then you've got all of those factors that are going to have to be picked up by the taxpayers. But some other stories that we didn't necessarily get to this week include stories about the electric vehicle manufacturing. And you've got the governor who was over in Decatur earlier this week with TCCI to do the shoveling of a new EV hub in a workforce training center. It's pretty good idea if you think about it, right? You want to have people trained up in EV vehicles. And you had Richard DeMargin, he's president of TCCI, which manufactures compressors for EVs. He said that the training program is eventually going to be expanded to schools across the state of Illinois.
By the time we open in the fall of 2024, we'll have expanded our partnerships to include Illinois State University, the University of Illinois at Springfield, Chicago State University, and Governor State University.
And he also talked about expanding across the state with that. Kristen Richards, the director of the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, also talked about the significance of this venture for this EV training hub.
TCCI was the first recipient of the state's REV incentive package, making today's groundbreaking truly a full circle moment.
But what's fascinating here, too, is as we move towards the governor's goal of, increasing the number of electric vehicles on Illinois roadways, there's a report from Anderson Economic Group that actually found that the costs for trucks to have an electric truck, it's the same as just going ahead and having a gas-powered truck. And entry-level and mid-level cars and SUVs cost more to charge at home and in public than they do to fill up at a gas station for the equivalent model. So are you, second-guessing going out and buying an electric vehicle? I know our power bill's gone up dramatically in the past year. It seems to be going up all over the place. And Ameren, Illinois, they're looking to, saying that they could save costs if they get a monopoly, and one particular bill would allow for that. But Governor J.B. Pritzker, he's indicated that he is going to veto this bill that allows for Ameren to have right of first refusal for building transmission lines. Here's the governor.
Competition is important, that we want to keep costs down for our customers across the state, the customers of our utilities, and that having a competitive environment helps do that. I'm still considering what I'll do with the bill, but I think you understand at least where my head is at.
So that could be a bill that comes up during fall veto session. Stay tuned.
The Fly SPI Studios. Take the easy way out.